We now have a session on a built environment dedicated to what Sudhakar introduced to us in the morning. I would like to invite our charter member, Ishan Singh. He's also the member of the committee that put together this event for you today. We've got two people from our event committee that on this panel today that put this event together. I would like to invite Ishan Singh, MD, RE Capital Ventures, who would co-moderate this panel and will also invite his panelists. Ishan, warm welcome.
All right, thank you, Pasna. Good to see all of you. I'm just going to ask Ashish, Rakheja to come on stage, please. Madhusudhan, ma'am. Sailesh, Manjusha. Guys, we were talking outside. I found everybody with Sailesh earlier. And Priyank, obviously. When you was in the list?
There are 6 tables, you can sit on it.
That's fine, that's okay. Yeah. Where's Sailesh? Yeah. We are trying to locate Sailesh. Do you call him? See if you can reach out to him. No, but all right. Let's start. Okay. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to introduce the panelists to you a little bit, and then Priyank's going to take over and discuss this whole concept of built environment. Ashish ji is over here. Ashish is one of the most respected people in India when it comes to the concept of creating institutional buildings which are sustainable. And he's designed over 4,000 projects. He specializes in high-performance buildings, which I'm actively involved in leading design activities of electromagnetic services for 11 net zero energy buildings, 2 net zero water townships, and over 100 platinum-rated green building projects in India. If you guys aren't familiar with the concept of what net zero is, I'm sure Ashish will tell you a little bit more about that. Well, he's the presidential member of the ASHRAE, which is Indian Society of Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning, and the first Indian to be elected as Vice President of Services on the global board of ASHRAE USA as well. Madhusudhan is the founder and CEO of Oorja Energy. Some of you may have seen the standee outside. He's a serial entrepreneur with 2 successful exits. His remarkable career includes multiple filed patents in these areas and has a pioneering role in introducing various groundbreaking technologies to the commercial landscape in India. Among these innovations are radiant cooling, geothermal cooling, solar and waste heat-based cooling, all of which align with his commitment to promoting energy-efficient and environmentally friendly buildings across India. Manjusha is here. Manjusha plays a very important role because she runs a company called BrigadeREAP. They are actually a startup accelerator focusing on finding entrepreneurs which want to create a business in various sustainable solutions for a built environment, which is not just commercial buildings, but generally construction and related sectors. So she heads the portfolio growth efforts over there. And Priyank is a managing partner at the AEON Alpha Fund. He studied at Stanford, and personally he's invested in several startups in the sustainability sector. He has an industrial manufacturing background. So I think what we're going to do is let Priyank lead off. We'll try to explain the concept of built environment to everybody here.
Thank you, Ishan. Can everybody hear me? Okay, great. So today we are here on this panel to talk about the built environment. Now that's a very rarely heard term in sustainability summits that I attend at startups. In India, we talk about sustainability, we talk about solar, we talk about EVs. But can anybody guess how much time do we spend inside built environments? Any guesses? If 100% of your time was to be divided, how much is it in a built environment, an environment which is either in some way protecting you from the natural elements?
More than 90%.
92%. That's right, Ashish. So he knows his business. everything that we live in, our houses, our offices, our hospitals, whether you go to malls, whether we go to airports, whether we go to factories, whether we go to even transportation hubs, data centers, they're also climate controlled. In fact, technically, even your car and your plane and your train is a built environment where the conditioned space is being created for your comfort. But leaving that detail apart, we spend 92% of our time indoors. The energy footprint of the built environment is 40% of global energy consumption. You know, aviation, 3%. Mobility, 12%, at least road transport. Built environment is 40%. That is what, is hard for people to understand when we are dealing with it, and it's so much in our background. Everything that we are sitting in today is a built environment. Also, to give you context of scale, can I just ask, what do you think is the most successful policy implementation from a net zero or a decarbonization perspective from the Indian government? We talk a lot about solar, EV. Who says it's solar? Who thinks solar is the most successful decarbonization effort by the government? Anybody think it's EVs? I guess everybody's wondering because I'm asking, that's not the answer. I'll give you the answer. The single most effective change that the government policy has done is what was called the Ujala scheme. It's the Unnat Jyoti by Affordable LED for All. In 2015, the Indian government chartered the EESL, Energy Efficiency Services Limited of India, to make LEDs affordable. At that time, LEDs were 310 rupees. Now, by bulk buying and auction tendering and in-housing the capacity, those LEDs are today available at 39 rupees. 87% drop in LED consumption. How many of you have bought an incandescent bulb in the last 3 years? I haven't. You all get LEDs. 10 years ago, just 10 years ago, you couldn't find LEDs because it was 310 rupees. India has installed 10.9 million LED bulbs. And this is one of the enablers for the government to do rural electrification, because the amount of energy requirement went down so much that they could have, with much lower capacity, electrification happen. They are offering under the Ujala scheme 10 rupee bulbs for LEDs. What's the impact? This installed base today in India every year saves 50 billion units of electricity. 50 billion units of electricity. That is equal to the annual output of the entire solar capacity of India of 70 gigawatts installed in the last 10 years. So today, what we are generating by solar is every year being saved by the Ujala scheme over the last few years. So if you just take a reference, 2.8 million EVs, they save about 2.5 million tons of carbon. Ujala saves 40 million tons of carbon every year in India today. So we all hear about the massive progress India is making in solar and in our carbon footprint. But if you don't pay attention to this one example, you are missing a big part of what moved the needle for India's carbon footprint per user, per capita, per GDP, I should say, because per capita is increasing. But our energy and carbon footprint per capita of per GDP unit. So that's just to give you a reference of what kind of an impact the built environment has. The change in India before this, and Ashish has taught me this because I joined the industry 15 years ago. He's been doing this 35 years, I believe. Electricity and air conditioning was approximately the same amount of energy footprint in a building. Today, electricity has dropped by 65, 70%, Ashish? And now it's HVAC, which is the biggest, which is again 40%. In fact, if you look at the forecasts for net zero, the first fuel, the most important leg for net zero is energy efficiency, not renewable, not electrification, energy efficiency. It is potentially 40% of the target goals can be achieved by that. And I'm not kidding. By the way, I checked, these 40% are all separately verified. They all happen to be 40%, so it's not an error. 40% of the world energy demand is in buildings. Almost 40% of that energy demand is in air conditioning. And we can save 40% of the net zero goals by doing energy efficiency. So we have to understand that this is a huge part of our economy. 13% of global GDP is spent on the built environment. 13%. That is more than $15 trillion. And for Indian context, India still has to build. For reaching the levels of prosperity and growth that we want, we still have to build 1.5 to 2 times the actual amount of built space that we have in the future. And this is not talking about, the kacha pakka construction, which is not qualified because that will get displaced with more formal and codes compliant construction. So 1.5 to 2 times what is already built as of 2023 is still to be built. So my dear audience, the whole point of all of this emphasis was to say this is important. And that's why we are here on this panel. And I thank you for your attention. Hope you learned something new today. I have been investing in building in this industry for 15 years. And I see there's a lot of opportunity. And that's what I would like to have the time of our panelists. And thanks to Ishan and for Tai to bringing this panel together. If I may first start from the end user perspective or the market maker perspective. Brigade Group is one of the largest groups in India. They bought the first patented sustainability product that I offered like 10 years ago. So Manjusha, if you could help us with a perspective from the point of view of builders who are actually doing the, making the built environment. Welcome Sailesh, please join us. And also the end users that you are catering to. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Priyank. Those were quite insightful numbers that you just said, which emphasize on the importance of the built environment in the whole picture. Talking of some macro levels, to set some context, the green building stock in India went up by 36% since 2019, right? And recently, the 2022 report by USGBC, India has been ranked number 2 in the number of buildings being certified as green. So definitely, there's a lot of demand. If there was no demand, we wouldn't be seeing such high growth in numbers. Talking from an occupier's perspective, sustainability has become now in the top 3 considerations after the location and rentals. So occupiers have started asking for it. Also, they are okay to pay a premium rental for a sustainable building, right? So we definitely see a demand. And as a builder, I would say it's not about a moral obligation anymore. It's business for them. If they need to do business, they have to become more sustainable. And hence, as builders, it becomes our responsibility because, like you said, builders become a part of their Scope 3 emissions. And Scope 3 is the highest contributor in the bigger game. So it becomes our responsibility to give them more sustainable buildings so that their emissions can reduce and our emissions can reduce, right? So I think it's, like I said, it's not a moral obligation anymore. To be in the business, we have to adopt all this. And hence, I would, the startups building out there, I would encourage all of you to go grab this opportunity because we are just not talking anymore, we're also doing it. From a builder's perspective, I would say we look at this at 3 levels. Starting from site selection, we need to be very careful as to how we are affecting the biodiversity, the water tables. I think that's a part of sustainability as well, along with the energy that you spoke about. There are a lot of startups innovating out there who are telling us that how you're going to affect the water tables if you build such a large building tomorrow on this land parcel, right? So great work these guys are doing. Coming to the operational side of things, which you spoke about, how do we make our buildings more energy efficient and more water efficient? I would say that's the low-hanging fruit out of the all because older buildings need to be retrofitted. We need to make them more energy efficient than what they were when we built them. So of course, that's a big market, and I'll let the experts talk about that more. The third part of it is the avoided carbon, which is the high-risk segment, as I would say, because you cannot expect builders to change concrete overnight, right? There is no good and equally price substitute available like that in the market. I'm working with a lot of alternate material startups, and they're doing some great job. But like I said, it's also high risk for builders. So, you need to think about the risk reward for us to use these solutions. So as a builder, I would say we are looking at these three categories and innovations in these three categories. And there's a huge market. A lot of buildings still need to be built. So I would highly encourage startups innovating in these spaces to think about the categories they want to work in, the market size of each of these opportunities, and please go seize them. So, yeah.
Thank you, Manjusha. Thank you. That's very encouraging. I think the most important word of all the details you mentioned is that you end users are willing to pay a premium for the rental. That really starts to change the economics of everything. From here, I'd like to ask Ashish. Ashish has been practicing in this industry, and he has seen India from a place where sustainability was probably not a topic in people's mind to where it is today. And his and my mentor, Dr. Jain, when he started IGBC. So Ashish, if you could give us a perspective of where we were and where we have reached, and also help us understand what we need to do and to go forward from a consulting engineer and policy perspective.
Thank you, Priyank. I think you've thrown in a lot of numbers, and so did Manjusha. Let me try to stitch the things together for you. The green building movement in India started in 2001, where we made our first green building, which was rated on a US scale, because earlier we used to talk about that in US. We started the movement from there, and since then India has not looked back. As Manjusha said, today we are the second largest green footprint in the world. In terms of the built environment that we have created, we have close to 13 billion square feet that is there. We have done well, and Priyank's statement, they said that we started the green building movement. I think that's little different, because we've always been green to start with. If you look at our lifestyle, look at our buildings traditionally, which were done, we were very, very sustainable. Of course, we deviated because we modernized, and with the population rise, the thing started becoming difficult. But having said that, we have a target, a sword hanging on our head for 2070 when we say that India is going to get decarbonized. 40%, to exact number is 39% of the global emissions or the carbon emissions are coming from the buildings. As Priyank was saying earlier, we are talking about mobility, we are talking about aviation. Those are small numbers. A large defaulter is right here. Now look at it from India perspective. We are at this point of time about 33% urbanized. We have an X trillion dollar economy, and we intend to become the third largest economy by 2030. That's where we will be, $7 trillion, we will be the third largest economy. We also have our Amrit Kal going on, which according to our Honorable Prime Minister, we have a Vedic astrologers who told us there's an Amrit Kal going on. 2050, our Amrit Kal would finish somewhere around that time. And incidentally, 2045 to 2050 is when we'll become a developed world. Now, developed countries has an urbanization rate of typically about 65-70%. We are at half. The built environment that you see, the buildings that you see today, is just half of what has to exist in next 25 years from now. That means we have to construct at a huge pace. 40% carbon emissions come from the buildings. We are going to be a developed country. We have a decarbonization target on our head of 2070. Imagine the pressure. That means not only we need to build, keep emitting our carbons into the air, but also decarbonize at the same time. Now, this is a double-edged thing which is running, and this needs to be resolved. So the pressures of decarbonization are going to come on the buildings in a big way. That's what we are seeing. Next, it's been COP26 is when we made the announcement. COP28 is yet to happen. That happens in November end in Dubai. Not even 2 years have passed. And look at the number of topics or number of discussions we have done on decarbonization in just less than 2 years' time. The rate of change which the industry is going to see, or the construction industry is seeing, is unprecedented. Manjusha spoke about already there is a pressure on the developers where the end users are asking for this. There are regulatory changes which the government is talking about at this point, where they would like the buildings to get regulated to a point that we are able to bring down the carbon emission. That's why you're seeing the solar program, the renewable energy program, you're seeing lots of things which are happening. All I can say, because I don't want to take all the time, but all I can say is the codes and standards are also currently being rewritten, including the National Building Code of India, where we would be focusing on this. The ironical part is, Priyank, 40% emissions right here in the built environment coming from here. We hardly have any new ideas which are coming in. If you look, whenever you talk to startups, we always talk on technology side. We are not talking much on the built environment side, and that's where the biggest mismatch is currently happening.
Thank you, Ashish. Thank you very much for your insights. I know as a chair of the ECSBC, Energy Conservation and Sustainability Building Code that you're writing, as well as the new building code that you're chairing, you are dealing with these issues head on. And you're right. We are not seeing the innovation that is needed in the startup world. And whatever be the reasons, there are many things that we will talk about. But let me first ask a startup who is trying to make change in this space. Madhusudhan, if you could talk about how you as a provider is trying to bring change in this space via the innovation or work that you are doing.
Thank you. So, for nearly a decade, I believe that the technologies could really bring change. But I've realized that there are enough and mature technologies in this space which already can offer significant reduction in energy consumption, right? While innovation should go on, these technologies exist. So lately I have changed my thought and said, maybe the answer lies in the right business model. And what we have looked at is how it has happened in other industries, where earlier you would buy a server or you buy a software. I remember way back, people had to fork out a significant amount to buy a CRM software. Today, you can just go sign up for a Salesforce, and that has expanded the market significantly. So we are looking at a model similar to that. I'm specifically talking about cooling as a service. We're also offering, on a smaller scale, net zero as a service, which would make adoption of that technology not a very technology-intensive evaluation exercise, which is where fatigue starts, doubt starts. So I truly believe that the change in the business, the more players they would be in the space where they would make it easy for the end consumer to adopt sustainable and energy efficient technologies, whether it's cooling or whether it's something else. I think that would expand the market significantly. Today, anything that you slap it with a tag called sustainable, organic, circular, is sold at a premium. And when you sell anything at a premium, we do that today, right? When you sell anything at a premium, you end up catering to a niche. And how much ever a niche market may save, unless everybody is on the bandwagon, you will not achieve, we will not achieve what we are set out to achieve, which is combat the challenge of climate change, achieve our net zero goals, achieve our decarbonization goals. So to get everybody on the bandwagon, what I know and what I believe is if you're able to offer sustainable and energy efficient solution at a price point that is lower than conventional, which is what ESL did with that Ujala scheme. So if we can do an Ujala plus in the built environment, I think that would help us significantly leapfrog and achieve our targets much before 2070. I think that's my take, and we have that opportunity here because especially if you talk about air conditioning, our adoption rate is somewhere around 8%. Even China has about close to 70%. So what we did in that LED space, if we could do something like that in the rest of the services in buildings, I think that would be a great opportunity. Just the air conditioning opportunity, World Bank pegs it at the investment opportunity at around $1.6 trillion. So you can imagine the market size.
Well, thank you so much, Madhusudhan. I think I have a small business idea I'll give anybody over here who will take it up. You know what's missing? There is no air conditioning gas indicator to any air conditioning unit. You know, there is nothing which tells you if the gas is low. So that's a business opportunity for somebody right here, right now. But what I'd like to do is just introduce Sailesh a little bit. Sailesh is part at Anthill, and Anthill has also, like Brigade, they have set up a venture which is funded by the DLF Family Office and Gruhas, where they are looking at innovative startups in the built environment sector and in the greater construction sector. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Sailesh and Manjusha questions, or ask them to reflect on their experience on some of the new startups which are addressing or trying to harness new technologies, coming up with new ideas to solve the problem. And second part of that's going to be on how they evaluate the startups, because a perception in the market is that the market size is not big enough, which I hope what Priyank and all we're talking about has helped dispel the perception, because India is going to be the biggest market. Right? So let these guys talk about what they're seeing, the opportunities in the sector, the kind of startups they invested in. Please give some examples. And last one question is going to be, what do you look at when you're looking to evaluate a startup?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Ishan, for that. Sorry, guys, for coming in late. I almost missed the panel. So at Gruhas Aspire, the program we run, which stands for Accelerated Sustainable PropTech in Real Estate. When we started this last year, we started researching the space. We have been investing in built environment, but we haven't looked at it from a sustainability perspective. And the kind of companies we have been evaluating over the last 2 years has been an eye-opener for us as well. Like for the first program which we launched last year, we had over 190 applications, of which the relevance was less than 10%. And that's when we started looking or expanding our horizons beyond the regular accelerators, academia, and started looking at how can we identify founders who have the passion, the grit, and the patience to really work in this industry, because that's what we believe it takes to disrupt this space, unlike the other sectors. All of them have the different challenges, but built environment, especially being such a large sector. I was just thrown a metric the other day. Can any of you guess how many houses are currently built a year in China versus how many are being built in India? Would anyone like to venture a guess? Okay, so in China, currently over 50 lakh homes are built every year, compared to India, which is less than 5 lakh homes. Given this kind of volume we have, the kind of urbanization, as you know, my colleagues have just spoken about, there is a huge rising need for built environment in this country, and I think we are at the right cusp of how do we develop it more sustainably. Some of the companies we've evaluated are folks who are looking at new materials, folks who are looking at how do we create sustainable practices in building new homes, ecosystems, at the same time, whole new complete cities. And we work very closely with the Ministry of Housing Urban Affairs, their think tank, NIUA, to essentially identify the opportunities, not just in making cities smart, but making ecosystems sustainable. And for us, in the recent cohorts, we have seen companies who, as you know, as Ishan just mentioned about air conditioning, it's been, sorry, not Ishan, Madhusudhan has mentioned about air conditioning. I think it's a very interesting company we have looked at, which has built one without a compressor and has been able to put it all on solar, makes it a net zero product. And we are currently looking at scaling it up across the country. However, the most interesting use case they've received so far is air conditioning tents at a wedding in Jaipur, and that's the largest order. And then somebody coming to them in air conditioning resort in Bora Bora. And we are more keen on how do we create this impact on a much more mass scale. How do we take this to every household? Because that's what we wish to really change about the ecosystem and the community. We've looked at companies which have made bricks from plastic. When we started working with them last year, this is a very interesting company from Guwahati. They were using less than 2% plastic. Today, they're at 10% of the product is plastic, the rest is fly ash, which is still a net zero product. So we look at companies, founders predominantly who have the sustainability prowess and can really ride this journey, because this industry is not easy to crack through. The industry is really, really old, and hence the challenge to break through mindsets, to bring about change is so much more challenging. To answer the second question on what we look at in terms of evaluating companies, as I mentioned, it's always the founder more than the idea, because ideas, as you know, Ishan just threw out, I think are truly dime a dozen. It's all about execution, folks. And I think that's where we really are keen about, and hence the need for us to run programs which are 6 months long, because we don't believe in speed dating. And I'm sure Manjusha can attest to that, because I think they've run this much longer than we have. And we truly believe, you know, getting into bed and working with them, understanding how they react in stressful conditions to when they get a large order. All of that really matters for us, and hence we invest execution capital at the very beginning, but the larger checks go during the demo day. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just quickly add on to that. So few learnings after working with startups, and this also sort of feeds back into what we look for now when we are working with startups, is the risk-reward parity as to how risky is the product that you're selling to a developer or to an IPC or to a facility manager. Because it's buildings we are talking about. There are certain things that you cannot expect them to change overnight. And what is the cost to them, right? How much are they saving? What is in it for them? So I think articulation of what you're providing and what's in it for the customer is very, very important. So startups having products positioned that way help us to sort of evaluate, okay, what is in it for the builders or for the ecosystem, and what are the kind of cost savings you're giving them. The second thing, of course, like Sailesh mentioned, it's not about getting one customer on board. It has to be recurring, right? Builders tomorrow cannot work with a startup which they don't know is not going to be around after 2 years, right? So I highly urge, of course, investors here play a major role. These are not SaaS startups who work on clicks and number of customers, right? The startups operating in build environment have a lot of cash flows issues, because practically on ground the sales cycles are long, and they struggle with cash flows, they struggle to be around. So we as investors, of course, investors like Anthill and other people who invest in prop tech, the request is to look at these startups from different metrics, support them during their cash flow journeys, be with them as they get more business on board, because like I said, that selling overnight is not possible. It's not a SaaS startup. So you need to get your foot in the door, do 1 pilot, 2 pilots, 10 pilots probably, to convince people that, you know, the product actually works before you actually scale up. So becomes very, very important to demonstrate that kind of a fit. And of course, we are all here in the ecosystem to help you do that. But at the same time, please look at the product. What is the hair on the fire problem? Are you solving that for your customers? And of course, your business model, so that it's not a very capital heavy sell to the other person, because no one is going to put that much money on day one. So look at OpEx models, look at your products, and then go sell outside. So that would be something that I would look in startups.
I just want to add to, I have a little disagreement on Sailesh's point that the industry is old. It's not old. Industry is too big, because this is the second largest employer in India, and the rate at which it's constructing. So it's vast. In terms of technology adoption, India Indian construction industry has been right at the forefront. So because it comes out of the necessity, please understand that as a country, we are short of energy, we are short of water, we are short of resources because we are too many people. Because of that, the adoption of the technologies take place much faster. Of course, being a vast industry, the penetration takes time, but if you have a product which can be proven, which can be demonstrated, it happens fast. Now, I'll give you an example. Phase out of old refrigerants, which were ozone depleting, and going to the new refrigerant. We were amongst the fastest in the world to do that. When it came to the adoption of a variable frequency drive, these are the equipment this is a part of equipment which ensures very high energy conservation. We were again ahead of what even the developed world were doing. So when it comes to technology, if it's a proven, if it shows sense, we are far ahead because energy is expensive, is not there. Water is expensive, is not there. So that's the reason it happens. Yeah, go ahead.
Actually, along with what was spoken earlier, I want to ask Darshan a point. When you go to a client who's going to buy your solution, which is a better widget or better way of doing something than what was done earlier, what is the mindset you encounter? What is the challenge you encounter when you're trying to pitch them or convince them to adopt what is obviously a better solution for them in the long term, economically, and also for the environment?
All right. I think, so I'll divide this into two. One is where customer is convinced that this is a better solution, but cannot spend the extra money that is required. The cost becomes the barrier. The second is just the divided, what do you call, benefits, especially if you take nearly 60% of the buildings that are built in India are speculative buildings, right? The builder doesn't know who's going to occupy, who's going to be the end user. So in that case, the tricky situation is, why should a builder incur this expense, cost, when the benefit is being enjoyed by the occupant, right? So the divide in somebody spending while the benefit is being taken by somebody else, but I'm happy to note from Manjusha that that's changing, and the sooner it changes, I think everybody's interests would be aligned and more such technologies and solutions would be adopted.
Fabulous. I think that's a very good point, and I want to add to that, Madhusudhan, what I have seen myself. India, like a decade ago, was a build and sell industry. People built offices, apartments, sold it. Then India with DLF Group and Brigade and Embassy and other people have started to now go into an operating model where big players like Blackstone have come in. We have now REITs, real estate investment trusts, that have become an investment method where the person who builds the building owns and operates it and then leases out space. And when that happens, the person who's doing the investment upfront, he is looking at lifetime cost, not just upfront cost. Because if you are only building and selling, then you care about upfront cost, you care about the capital, you say future energy cost is someone else's problem, which is what you're saying. And this shift, which is an economic shift that is happening in the country very rapidly, enabled by REITs, enabled by the international players, enabled by RERA and other methods, policy changes, which have made people realize that real estate is not going to go forever and ever being chased by black money. That is going to enable the ecosystem to have a long-term total cost of ownership, lifetime ownership approach. And that is what will drive upfront investment for the energy efficiency, for performance. As you said, Madhusudhan, it is true that currently available technologies can achieve significant change. The IEA estimates 50% of our targeted energy efficiency improvements required for net zero are available from current technologies. Ashish talked about some of the technologies. We have people in India, buildings that he has built, and customers like Infosys, ITC, building net zero buildings. So the technologies are there. They have to be adopted. And as Ashish said, it's a vast, very large industry which builds goods that sustain for 30 years. So there is a momentum that has to be learned, and that makes it harder to change the industry. with that, before I ask if there are any audience questions, maybe Ashish, if you have any comments of areas of opportunity or problems that you feel maybe people can disrupt with innovation, because we have startups here and also investors like myself who has been investing in this space would want to know what are the problems that you as designers are not able to solve for customers that maybe some startups or people in this audience can look at.
No, I would still, I would take it a little differently. I would say that still the pace at which the change will happen, we are underestimating it. As I said, because of the 40% carbon emissions, 2070 we think is far away, but please understand, we are linked to the world. You cannot be the developed economy by 2050 and say, we are still going to take time to catch up with the carbon emissions. That's not going to happen. Already the pressures are coming on the developers from a simple reason that the whole economies are linked globally. The companies sitting in US, they have a decarbonization target of 2030. They will, you cannot expect they'll decarbonize in US by 2030, but in Indian arm, they will say they'll decarbonize later. So the pressures on operations, on equipment, on buildings is right here. So it's happening now. While we talk, India may be saying 2070, the competition among states has begun. Bihar has gone and said, we will decarbonize by 2050. Maharashtra has gone ahead and said, they will decarbonize by 2050. Look at the competition starting. So the things are going to happen much faster. One change which we are seeing, I just want to add to you're talking about, the biggest change in the construction industry that we are seeing now is monetization of the assets. The whole concept was, मैंने building बना ली तो अब मेरे बच्चे और मेरे उसके next generation उसको खाएंगे. That state, that is going away. Now, if you look at the developers, like the one sitting here, they build, they sell, they monetize the asset, they move on to the next one. The whole thing is about how fast we are complying with it. The global norms are coming in. Like today, the manufacturing setup in India is facing a big issue when they're selling to Europe. We are a large exporter of steel. Steel is made in the factories. Europe has put in the CBAM there. The carbon border adjustment mechanism is here. We are talking about 30% carbon tax being put on them. Similarly, the exports that we are wanting to do will be under pressure. So that's why I said the decarbonization, much faster business you can expect. And I have said that at many forums. I give ourselves next 5 years to do capacity building. By 2030, you have to launch into the market in a big way. So those of you who are ready would be the ones who will be reaping the benefit.
Ashish, I'm sorry to pin you down, but where is specific opportunity you see? If I come to you and say, I have lots of money, okay, I want to invest, what do I do?
I'll tell you straight away. There are two parts to the carbon emissions in our industry which happens. One is what we call embodied carbon, and second is the operational carbon. Embodied carbon is where we talk about what's embodied into the steel, cement, and all. We have time for that. The bigger issue is right now the operational carbon, which is where the government is focusing on, where the whole thing is about put a renewable energy, your job is done, you are offsetting. That's not the way. Energy efficiency is the way. One of the biggest, anything that we come out with energy efficiency is what is going to be useful. And more important is, what we are missing in this world is operating the buildings. When we are making this huge stock, we don't have people to run the buildings. Our buildings are running inefficiently, and that's where the automation, the IoTs, the AI, the models are being talked about. That's the big opportunity which is right ahead of us. If you were to ask me to put money, I'll put my money in the IoT and AI right now.
And I will support Ashish on that. Personally, having worked on a startup for digitization of building energy, my co-founders are here in the audience. We have achieved 20-25% energy savings on buildings just by digitizing. Without applying big data, without applying AI, just by digitizing the energy, we can operate buildings much more efficiently than what we are doing today. There is a lot of opportunity. The market is massive, much larger than EVs. So my urge to all people who are thinking about startups in this space, come to Sailesh, come to Manjusha, come to me. We are investing in this area. We know there is opportunity, there is a market need, there is an economic need, there is a need for the planet, and there's a need for humanity in this area. And I hope from this panel, if I can leave you all with this space is big. Do not ignore it if you think about sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you, folks. That was great insights on an industry that is going to be key as a fast, rapidly developing economy that India is going to be for the next 20, 25 years. Wonderful insights and exciting news around the possibility of leapfrogging technologies in order to be doing and achieving those goals that we set out to. We now break for lunch. We'll meet you after lunch another 45 minutes to 50 minutes later. Lunch was slated to be 1 hour. We will be cutting a few minutes from the lunch. See you in about 45 minutes. Thank you.